Okay guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Daggett, this is Daggett Designs, and I'd like to welcome you back to the table for another drawing tutorial here. Starting off with some sketch paper, a lead pencil for sketching, an eraser, and a sharpener. Now we're looking at doing another half sleeve design here. You'll notice I'm doing this on a smaller sheet of paper. This is an A4 piece of sketch paper, and I've just put out my basic sort of half sleeve shape. So if you'd like to, you can pause the video and just copy this shape here. Basically a big oval at the top and then this sort of rectangular box shape at the bottom to create our top of the arm sort of shape here. Now don't feel worried that you're doing this on too small of a piece of paper. It just means your design will have to be a little bit simpler, but you could always blow this up to a larger size if you were intending to tattoo it. A lot of the time half sleeve designs are done at this size first. So to start off with, I'm going to fill out sort of my main subject matters throughout the design, but I'd like to start by filling the bottom of the sleeve here, and I'm going to do that using a lotus flower. So the basic sort of layout of this, I'm going to drop in sort of a large oval shape like this. That's going to give me the top of my lotus pod. I actually want to make that a little bit wider, sort of like that. And I'm going to drop down either side with a bit of a curve. So this is going to create, if you were to keep going, this would create like a cup or a cone sort of shape, like that. Now from here, I like to just lay out the petals and try to get a rough shape of how I want things to look. So the petals are kind of like long, they're almost like leaf shapes. They're skinny in the start and they taper off towards the end, like that. So that's going to give us a nice sort of petal shape to start off with, and of course that would now be obscured, and you sort of start to build up your different petal shapes. Now I like to make sure there's a little bit of this pod still showing, because that's a pretty important element to making this look like a lotus. And I'll throw in a little overlap here for this petal, and I'll bring it back down like this. Now you have to let me know in the comments down below if you need a separate tutorial for the lotus flower, because I am going through it relatively quickly here, but I just want to give you guys a good introduction on how I would start to put together a half sleeve design like this. So one of the main questions I get asked all the time is how to draw Japanese backgrounds. Very specifically, like how to construct the finger waves or how to construct the clouds. I think there's a lot of difficulty in that because some of the shapes don't necessarily flow into each other naturally. You kind of need to force them to. And sometimes there's an element of chaotic movement within them where you kind of don't want them to flow too smoothly. If everything's too smooth and uniform, it ends up looking a little too static. Not enough movement in the piece. So I think it can be helpful sometimes to actually add a little bit of non-uniformity to your background elements. Okay, so I'm going to go through how to add in the background once we've got in our main subject matter here. So I'm going to finish dropping in our little lotus here. I'll go over the center details shortly. So once I've got all my petal shapes in and I'm pretty happy with that, I'm going to start by dropping in some oval shapes on the top of our pod here. So just dropping in a whole bunch of oval shapes. I try to keep them roughly the same size. The ones in the middle are going to have to be just a tad smaller to sort of squeeze them in, but dropping in all of these oval shapes, and you could fill in gaps with some smaller ones if you'd like. And then I like to follow the outer shape of these ovals to create my actual line around. So we're not doing a completely smooth oval, we're going to follow our little oval shapes. And I actually see sometimes people doing these lotuses and they follow their top oval around a complete circle. Giving it this sort of bumpy texture by following your oval shapes is going to give it a slightly more realistic look. I mean, that's what a lotus pod tends to look like. It has that sort of flowery shape to the outside of it. Now, for this section here, you don't really need to draw in any lines because you're going to draw in the stamens, which in this case are just going to be these little noodle shapes, and I've covered these before. They're like little noodle or little sausage shapes, and you're using them just to fill in the areas and the gaps around your flower. So filling in the side at the front of the flower here. Now if you'd like to, you can come around to the back of your flower and add in a couple of little areas of the stamens showing from the other side. I try to make these ones really short because if you're comparing the front and the back side of your flower here, the front ones most of them aren't long enough to cover our front line here, just a couple of them. And so these ones wouldn't really be coming up that high either. So I try to only show just the very tip of it, but enough that you can imagine these on the other side of your pod there. All right, now at this stage, we're going to draw in a little added detail. Now I'm going to be completely honest with you guys and say, I don't know what the hell this is, but I see it a lot with Lotus tattoo designs, and I suppose everyone's going to have their own interpretation of it, but it's essentially like a bit of smoke or energy, smoke, maybe it's pollen, something coming out from the pod of the lotus and sort of flowing off into the design. And I think it's a really nice design element. It sort of helps tie things together, and it adds this little bit of magic to the illustration. But like I said, to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure exactly what it is, but I do think it looks nice. So I'm going to add in this like double curve that comes up in this direction. And then similar to doing the Japanese style flames, I'm going to loop around this way and just sort of whip that off. And I'll come around from the back here and whip that off as well. And then maybe just split this line off just in the middle. I'm going to drop a line back and split it off. So there's going to be like this V shape at the top where that splits off into two sections. That's just going to give us this little puff of smoke that comes out of our lotus there. Now, as part of our main subject matter, sometimes it's nice to have a couple of petals that are sort of flying around, and you'll sort of no doubt see this no matter what floral sort of Japanese design that you see. You'll have the main flower, and then a lot of the time there'll be petals that have fallen off the main flower and flowing in with the background. So sometimes it's nice to drop in a couple of petal shapes that are sort of flowing throughout your design. And to help tie the top and the bottom of the design together, it can be a good idea to drop your petal shapes in throughout the design, but bringing some of them up towards the top of the design. Now, before we start adding any subject matter to the top of our little sleeve design here, I'm going to add in the base of our design. So I usually like to start the bottom with some sort of rocky structure that our main flower here is sitting on. And I've gone over these Japanese style rocks before, but just to cover them quickly, you're essentially doing these very sharp angular lines to create your different rock structures here. So coming in and down, and then you add the details to them later. So I've just created this rock that comes up this way, and I'll have it going down and then out in this sort of direction here. So I add a curved line, little sharpness to it, another big curve, and a bit of sharpness to it at the bottom there. So it's going to give us this rock shape, and I don't like to have my rocks completely flat. I like to have them higher on one side and sort of have them coming down on an angle. That's going to just add a bit of variety to them. And you can add in just some little ovals. I like these little long sort of shapes, and that's going to give you just a bit of like a texture that's on the rocks, along the top of the rocks, and it's something that's done a lot of the time with those classic shapes. Now I also like to usually add in some little water spouts, so I'm just going to add in a little rough oval shape coming out of our rock like this, and from the inside of that I'll draw 1, 2 curves like this, right? And that's going to give us like a little bit of water spouting out of there. You can add in a couple of lines, and in between that sort of 2 curved lines, you can add in the bottom lines of the hole that you've created. But I don't like to touch the edges, just leave those open. That's going to give you that sort of shape. Now I want to place another rock in this area here, but I don't want a rock in front of a rock. So I like to just fill out this area using some finger waves. So I'm going to come around. Now your finger waves are basically going to be like little C shapes. Little C shapes that curve around themselves. And then you can add in these little bumps in between them. And that's going to give you basically a little finger wave shapes. And it's just creating minor variations in size and in the direction that they're flowing in. That's really going to give you the different shapes that you see with a lot of these Japanese finger wave designs. Now I've added in my finger waves, but there's going to be some bars running along the side here, and they're super important. So let's have a look at those. So for these bars, you're going to imagine following your C shape around. So maybe this one here is going to come around to there, following around and creating these curves. And I'm going to bring those up to basically this section here before our next rock. That would come down a little bit lower behind our wave there. And then with these bars, I'm going to double up on each of them, just adding an additional line next to them. Like this. And then you can link them up by adding a curve to the outside line. These bars are super important. This is what gives us that traditional Japanese style look. And you're going to do the same for your rock structure here. So at the base of the rock, I'll curve it. I'll add another curve in for our water spout. And I'll add a curve in for each little section of the rock at the front here. So at this point, I'm just adding in some additional wave bars here by curving the outside line and then following that shape up and behind my subject matter, and then doubling up on that line to create a gap, and then adding another curve. And this is essentially the method that I use to add in my different bars here. As we come around to the back, you can curve that off as well. Always doubling up on that line to create a center there. Now, a little note on these wave bars that come back through there, or wind bars, whatever you'd like to call them, is that they should sort of follow a direction. And I like to have things coming from the back of my half sleeve here through and down towards the front of the half sleeve. That's sort of the way that my mind interprets these background elements. So yeah, depending on how you're doing it, try to have a little bit of uniformity to parts of it, and then you can break that up with the chaos of the waves and the clouds, and that's going to give it that, like I said, that disruption of uniformity that's going to help sort of make it more interesting to look at, so that it's not so uniform and boring. But like I said, with these bars at the beginning here, try to have a little bit of uniformity to them. It can look really nice and sort of keep them flowing from one part of the design. Now from here, I'm going to add in my cherry blossoms. I'm going to just drop in circles for now, and I'll go over how to do one of my cherry blossoms here, but it's a pretty repetitive process. So we're just going to do one of them, and then I will skip through to the next part. So just adding in circles where you'd like them to be. If you are doing a copy of my design here, that's fine. That's totally appropriate for learning. So feel free to copy exactly where I'm putting my cherry blossoms. But like I said, you can sort of put them wherever you'd like them to be. In this case, I think I'm going to get rid of that petal. It takes up a lot of space there, and I'd like to put in another cherry blossom in that area. So, alright, a really quick look at cherry blossoms here. I draw in a circle for the center of my flower, like this. And I'm going to try and split this off into 5 even sort of sections. So we'll just rough it out. It doesn't have to be perfect, because these are organic shapes after all. So I've just done that into 5 roughly even shapes. I'm going to start at the base of each line. I'll come out and back in, create a V that touches back on our oval, and then back down like this. Turn my page, create our little V shape like this, come back down. And you're basically going to work your way around your little circle shape or your little oval shape and create these little petals just by adding in your V and then following back to your line. And I think it's important to mention here that they should be quite, I don't know how to call it, like bulbous, I guess, or quite rounded. I see a lot of cherry blossoms that are very skinny petals, and I mean, it's up to you. I don't like the way it looks when they're really skinny though, that's all. Now for the in between the circle, you can put 2 or 3 dots inside of each petal following that inner circle, depending on what will fit. In this case, I've done 3, but in outlining it, I may go with 2. And then in between each of your petals, you can put in this little triangular shape, and this is going to give you just the leaves at the back of the cherry blossom there, or the stem area. So this is a really simple way to draw a cherry blossom, and a lot of the time they're going to be drawn in this manner. It's a very traditional looking way to do it. Alright, we're back. I've done all the cherry blossoms and some petals there, and we're now going to look at adding a background to our second point of subject matter here. Now, a thing I'd like to point out here is some people like to do an entire half sleeve of waves, some people like to do a whole half sleeve of clouds. I like to do a combination of both. So I've actually got a water flower down here, something that grows in water. So I've got waves and rocks and those sort of features towards the bottom. And cherry blossoms a lot of the time are depicted with wind bars and clouds. So I like to actually split my designs into two, with a landscape sort of section, or the land section, and clouds and a sky section. Now, it may not make 100% sense if you were to look at this as a large painting, not as a half sleeve, because you're seeing two separate parts, but as a tattoo design, I think it looks really nice and brings a certain aesthetic quality to it. So I'm going to start in the section just behind our cherry blossoms here, and I'm going to come up, around, follow my line around to create a spiral like so. Okay? So creating this spiral shape that comes up and around into our cherry blossoms there. And I'm going to double up on our spiral shape from the outside like this. And the taper's sort of going to get wide as it comes around and down behind our bars here. So that's going to give us this spiral shape. Now you can come into the inside of that again and come out with another spiral. I just like to make sure when I do this that the lines taper out and then they get thinner towards the middle of the spiral there. Okay, so they're not supposed to be completely parallel in this case. So coming to the front of my spiral here, we're sort of finishing the edge of the sleeve here by adding in some clouds that just join back into our spiral there. This top section here, again, I want to have some clouds running on the top here, so I think I'm going to come around maybe to this flower here and add in the clouds. Now in this case, our clouds are just simple little curves that overlap with one another, and this is pretty typical of Japanese style clouds. You won't really see them done in many other ways. They're typically done in this fashion, and they're following the curve of our spiral along the top there, sort of running along the top of our spiral. I'm going to add another cloud section to the back here, coming behind our cherry blossoms, and adding in some curves for our clouds. Sometimes you'll do a shape that you're not happy with, you can just correct it and bringing that right the way down to join into the rest of the sleeve there. And then there's going to be this space at the top. Now you could fill it with more clouds. In this case, I think I'm going to add some bars to it to sort of help bring through the other areas of the design. So I'm doing this the same way I did the wave bars at the bottom, splitting it off and then coming around with a shape that creates these separate sort of bars around there. And that's really going to give us our half sleeve design. So our main subject matters are going to be the floral elements of our design. And you can see that we join them. So we've got the lotus sitting at the bottom. It comes up through its petal and through this smoke trail. And that's going to continue off into our spiral, which carries our cherry blossoms around. So that helps join the top and the bottom of our half sleeve, which is super important there. And then another thing, like I said, is keeping the bottom landscape and the top landscape a little bit different. Is just going to add a little bit to it and change things up a little bit so that it's not all waves or all clouds. You could do that if you'd like to, but this is the way I like to approach things. Now I'm going to go ahead and transfer this to some watercolor paper so that we can start painting it. The Big Oni brush set is out now with over 30 hand-drawn original stamp brushes for your use in Procreate. This set includes 9 different Hannya mask stamps, 12 different Oni head stamps, as well as left and right split head designs so that you can create your own unique illustrations. Now I've also included some classic Japanese characters, Reijin and Fujin, as well as 4 other full body Oni illustrations. So this is a total of 6 full body character designs, as well as 4 different floral background elements that you can work with to tie it all together and produce beautiful tattoo designs. As with all of my other brush sets, the tools in this set are not only perfect for creating finished tattoo designs, but can also be used for mocking up basic layout for tattoo designs, creating coloring pages that allow you to sort of express things with your own colors, but they're also perfect to use as an artist reference for your own study and character design. Now, I sat down and took the time to draw and design each of the stamps and brushes in this set by hand, and I designed them specifically to work together so that you can create flawless Japanese style illustrations just like this one. Now, if you're interested in picking up my brush set, you can go ahead to my website at daggettdesigns.com.au and pick up one today. Alright, the design is transferred to watercolor paper, ready to paint, and I've got my paint set up here, so I'm working with Liquitex acrylic inks as usual. I have solid carbon black, and then I've made up various shades of grey wash there. So all that is one drop of carbon black in each well, and then various levels of water. So I've got a light, medium, and dark grey wash, along with my solid black. Using Taklon synthetic brushes, number 5 and number 6, and a glass of water for blending and washing out my brushes. And in this case, I'm going to start with my solid blacks, which are these bars over here. So you can probably see that I just went back on what I said and jumped to my number 5. And that's because this is such a small sort of area. Now, in terms of this being solid black, you can shade these if you'd like, and it really depends how big you're going to do these. But some of the really traditional Japanese backgrounds just use solid black for a lot of the bars, almost like a tribal background. It's really strange, but instead of shading them, sometimes they're just done with solid black. And it does look really nice. It creates nice contrast with the image. Means some of your background bars are solid black and the ones that are more in the foreground are shaded, which I guess makes sense and helps add depth to them. Now you'll also notice that a lot of the bars here, I did them using pencil when I transferred it to watercolor paper. In the case of doing these black ones, it doesn't really matter whether you used pencil or pen. With the other ones, I like to use pencil. That way the very, very top of my bar can be a very light grey before transitioning to the next one. Now once those bars are in, I'm also going to do these small bars at the bottom, solid black. Like I said, this is going to really come down to how you want things to look, and there's different aesthetic qualities to doing these solid black areas. The reason I like to do them is to add enough contrast to the image. It really helps push out your main subject matters. And I've seen a lot of Japanese sleeve designs or even sleeve tattoos themselves, and sometimes they can be a little bit too grey and washed out, and I think that's one of the mistakes is people don't like to go too dark. They're scared of using solid black because it'll look too dark. Really depends, but I think you should try to have a nice balance between light and dark and use solid heavy blacks to your advantage to help create contrast and to boost out other areas of the design that would otherwise look very flat. Sometimes I'll come up with solid black like this. So starting at the bottom with solid black and working my way up. And I'm going to work around that little detail in the middle where we've got the water spout and just work my black up and around it. Now from here, I'll take my blending brush and I'll feather out those harsh edges to sort of help soften them to more of a grey. And the top of our rock is going to have more of a grey, washed out sort of grey colour. So we're not bringing the black sort of all the way up to the top of our rock there, but sort of blending it out to a grey. You can add a bit of black in from the other side as well if that looks too light. And then do the same, feathering that out and around and blending that grey up to the top of the rock. There's so many different ways to do rocks and different elements of design. Like everyone has their own way of doing things, so it's quite difficult to tell you guys, oh, you have to do it this way. And so I'm certainly not saying that. You can do this whatever way you like and whatever way you think looks best, but this is the way that I like to do these things. Now, once I've painted in all of my rock sections with the heavy blacks that I like there, I'm going to go in and paint the rest of my bars here, and I'm going to do these a little bit differently. So coming in with a medium grey here, I'm just going to go in over the top of the entire bar with this medium grey. This is going to give me a base colour or a base coat to work with of grey, basically going to contain the shape of the bar and sort of give me a shade to work with. So just going off this light to medium sort of grey for our bars here. Now at this point, once you've done your medium greys there, we can start to look at separating these bars by shade. So I'm going to come in with a dark grey wash here Now you could use black at this point, but I just find it difficult to do the longer areas of shading. So just coming in with a darker grey wash and bringing that right up to our, I'll add a bit of black actually, and bringing that right up to the top of our grey here, and then following our shape across, just leaving a strip of grey at the very top there, very similar to leaving a large skin break. Now if you'd like to, you can very gently blend your greys together at the top there, and that way you get a bit more of a gradient look to your greys. And you can continue with this method sort of all the way up your bar. Now I was just filling out the bar section at the top here, and I realized I should point this out. As you can see, I've gone over the top of this cherry blossom here, and that needs to be, I guess, a design element you take into consideration when doing these designs, but I've gone over the top of it and I've very purposely split that off with the top of the petals here, and those parts I have not gone over. This is really going to help with your layering effects, and I've done the same down the back here. I've split off this section and put it underneath a bar. The other section is above it. This is a really important element you'll see with a lot of traditional Japanese designs, is sort of putting elements of your background or your grays over the top of parts of the main subject matter. And this will, because we put grey over it, it's going to desaturate whatever colors we do and push this cherry blossom back into the background further than these ones, which are sitting more towards the front. It creates even more depth and three sort of dimensions to your image, even though we're drawing a two-dimensional artwork here. So that's an important little detail to notice. I'm just finishing off some of these bars, then we can look at the clouds and the finger waves, and we are close to being done. Alright guys, we are getting there. I've done all of the bar sections for now. Now I want to create some darker areas up here because we've got this very heavy dark area behind our Lotus, into a sort of medium and a light area in the middle. We need a little bit more dark towards the top here. Now our clouds are going to be wrapping around into our spiral. So I think in the center of the spiral I want to have black. But to do this I need to fill in my cloud section, so I thought I would show you how to do that. Now essentially for our clouds here, I'm just following the general shape of the outside of each section of the cloud, like this, using our medium grey wash. At the bottom here, I'll just blend them together using a bit more of our medium grey there. And this is looking very tonal at this point. I don't want that, so I am going to come back in with some darker shadows in a minute. So I'm going to take some solid black, and I'm going to come in behind our cherry blossoms here, and I'm going to fill in this section with solid black to begin with. Now once I've filled in that section, I'm going to come up and around our spiral here, just following along with my black at the base of these clouds. Now the best way to do this is in sections, I think, so rinsing my brush and then feathering out our black, just like so, and bringing that out into our clouds a little bit to help darken them. Then you can continue on with your black. Now the very last thing we're looking at the bottom here is the finger waves. I'm going to go in with some medium grey, and actually I'm going to go a bit darker for this center portion, so like this, and I'll just create this little loop like this. Now once you've done that little loop, you can come back with a slightly lighter grey wash, work around that little loop like this. And I like to just wash my greys out towards the end of my finger waves, sort of following the shape of the little fingers there, and have them sort of more white towards the end, like that. I'm going to come in, I'm not going to add that little loop to the base of this one, maybe I'll just add in a darker sort of grey for the base of this one. Coming in like this. And that's going to give us our little section of finger waves. Alright guys, so I went ahead and filled in all of my colors so that you could get a good look at how this looks once all of the colors are incorporated into our black and gray backgrounds. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope that you guys learned a lot and that I was able to teach you something today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.